Outstanding, the ultimate accolade for teachers. We challenge secondary geography teacher Andy Roberts to go from good to outstanding. A top inspector will observe one lesson. 2 experts will fine-tune his practice and beef up his presentation. He then gets 2 weeks to take on the advice before the inspector comes back for the final verdict.
If I don't deliver a good lesson to students in this school, they will let me know very, very quickly.
Sydney Russell School is a large mixed comprehensive in Dagenham, East London. Andy Roberts teaches geography. He's been teaching for 8 years.
I did my first degree in physical geography. Following that, I worked in outdoor education, and that's probably the career that directed me towards teaching.
The geography department rates Andy's teaching as good.
My motivation for teaching is the subject which I teach, which is geography.
And what I'd like you to do is see if, as a team, you can match that statistic with the correct statement.
Andy loves his subject and he uses that to impart a love and an understanding of it to the students he teaches.
What 3 things do you think are most important to make a successful Olympics? Not quite ready, need a little bit longer, okay?
The lessons ain't all copy out of a book or nothing like that. He talks to us and we give him the answers back, so it's all interacted.
Andy will focus the challenge on his Year 9s.
I've taught those students now since they joined Sydney Russell School. So we have a very positive working relationship. It's a nice class to be observed with.
1 minute, 1 minute.
Geography as a subject can be a little bit tedious at times, I have to admit, but he does then make it quite interesting for all the class.
Mr. Roberts inspires me because he's shown that he doesn't just teach geography, he lives geography.
It's really challenging to set targets for yourself or recognise what it is that really could give you a lift at this stage in your career. I've been teaching 8 years, a competent, a good teacher. It's really hard to get CPD that pushes you that little extra.
Andy's teaching a unit of lessons on urban regeneration, focusing on the Olympic Park 3 miles from the school in East London.
This is the first time I've actually now put together a series of lessons which will allow students to study regeneration and has a progression with regard to their skills, knowledge and understanding. Hopefully they're able to apply those skills to other regeneration projects. That's the key, that's what I want really at the end of it.
It's the morning of his observation. With hundreds of inspections under her belt, School Inspector Claire Gillies leads inspection teams up and down the country. She certainly knows an outstanding lesson when she sees one. Andy's got 60 minutes to impress our inspector.
Right, good afternoon, people. Now, the purpose of the lesson is to obviously achieve these objectives. And what I want you to do is go through each of the objectives and decide how well you can do that at the moment. For example, the first success criteria, Amber, says...
I understand why East London was chosen to host the 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games.
OK. You make a decision.
Some outstanding lessons may be calm, but you're watching the pupils and there is a great deal of thinking and learning going on just by the subtlety of the teacher's questions. So it's very important to look at the learning through the learner's eyes to see whether there's some outstanding features there.
I want you to have a think about whether you're in favour of the Olympic Games being held 6 kilometres west of this site in 2012. If you're against the 2012 Olympics being held in East London, you stand on this side of the room. Rebecca, why are you in favour of the 2012 Olympic Games being held in East London?
All these people coming over are obviously going to need accommodation, food and all that, so that'll bring in a lot of money for the country.
Brilliant. Sit yourself down. Sit yourself down. As quick as you can, please. You have an OS map of the area of the Olympic Park. You also have an aerial photo. In addition to that, you have a collection of photos. And what I want you to do is use your map skills to work out which photo matches which of those locations on the OS map.
Wait. There's the red dots there, that's a train station.
Right, that's the marsh there, yeah?
Yeah.
So that must be number 3 because it's right near the marsh.
Cycle circuit, so it's going to be down here.
Oh, well spotted.
Oh, yeah. You're doing very well.
The lesson today, yeah, was quite challenging. The information we had was quite hard to gather at first, but when we had the Ordnance Survey map and we knew where the landscapes were, then it was easy to understand.
Location number 5, where do you think that is? Fiona?
E.
Which is?
Lee Valley Cycle Circuit.
And how do you know that that is number 5?
Because there's a cycle circuit right next to it.
Absolutely. OK, in front of you there's a pack of lots of opinions. These are things that people have said either on telly or in interview or in the newspaper. Pick one of the resources that you feel is most powerful. I want you to then move to the side of the room where your opinion lies. So, it's quite interesting. There seems to have been a shift. Let me go to Ellie. Which opinion is most powerful for you?
The Olympic bulldozer clears all objections out of the way. There can be no debate, no exceptions, no modifications. Everything must go.
Why is that opinion for you so powerful?
He's saying get rid of the old to make way for the new, but some of the old stuff is like useful to London. So
I'm going to ask you to go back to your seats, and the objective sheet I asked you to start out at the start to fill out at the front. Could I ask you to now do that again at the end of this lesson?
So how did Andy get on?
Thank you very much for letting me share that lesson with you. Let's just highlight and celebrate all the enormous strengths that are in your teaching skills. Excellent variety of activities. We had the sort of listening to each other, we had the kinesthetic by just a quick moving about. Perhaps the biggest compliment to pay you is that one of them said, well, you know, it's putting the world into context. So I thought, great. It was just such an enormous amount of content today that I felt the word I just felt prompted to use was almost overloaded. All the ideas, the content, where you were going, almost I felt we need a day for this.
I feared before the lesson maybe it was content rich, but I liked each element of the lesson so much. Yes. I wanted people's opinions to be a part of it. I wanted all of those images. There is an overload there, you're absolutely right.
Perhaps it could have just been thinned a little. I just feel there's perhaps a touch of your own personality that could come through a bit more. Your feelings, your views might just add a little warmth of your personality. Good afternoon, people was the start. It was an interesting
I wasn't conscious, it's obviously
an
something
interesting phrase.
Yeah.
You've got off to a very good start, and I'm sure the potential's there for some outstanding lessons as you move through the topics.
I think her comments were actually very perceptive. She made a comment about me not sharing my personality with the students. You know, one of my strengths is my classroom management, there's no doubt about that. And now I have that classroom management, maybe now I need to think about me and my personality.
With the first observation behind him, the inspector highlighted Andy's need to reduce the amount of content in his lessons and to bring more personal insights and warmth into his teaching. Now it's time to bring on the experts. To boost Andy's progress, help comes from voice and communications coach Ulrika Schulte-Bauchloh and secondary geography expert Ruth Totterdell. They start by watching his lesson.
And what I want you to do is go through each of the objectives and decide how well you can do that at the moment.
I felt that it wasn't a very engaging start for the students, just filling in a sheet about the objectives, and he said the purpose of the lesson was to fulfil the learning objectives, which doesn't sound terribly exciting. The thing I'm going to work on with him most is that beginning of the lesson, trying to connect the children to the Olympic Games and set them off on these activities, but try and maybe link them all with a purpose.
What I want him to do is be a little bit more personally involved. Where are these photos taken? Yeah. How did he get this idea? His vocal delivery is great. His body language is much more withdrawn. So I notice he covers a lot his mouth, folds his arms, covers his chest. So I will work simply on things like, have the courage to reach out. It's okay.
I think he is a passionate teacher, but I don't think that passion comes over. So I thought there were lots of strengths to the lesson. Is there anything that you feel didn't go very well?
I wanted to challenge the students with regard to what strategies do I use to make sense of this. However, there was too much, quite simply, and I shouldn't have overloaded it quite as much.
Right, Andy, one of the things we're going to work on is the purpose of your lesson. Now, right at the beginning, you said that the purpose was to achieve the objectives, and there was a long list of objectives. But I thought, what really was the aim of your lesson?
I've reflected on those objectives, and I think the problem is that there was too much going on in that lesson, and I should have focused on a few of those objectives for the time in that lesson.
Yes.
And there was 2 lessons there, maybe 3.
Just want you to maybe think of like 4 things that if you overheard on the way out, you'd have been really pleased to hear.
What I want them to be saying, there's more going on than I had realised.
Do you think that all those purposes were achieved in the lesson?
I do think the majority of them would have asked some of those questions to themselves.
Rather than just having a list of objectives, it's good to actually think, well, what do I want these children to go out with? I'd like to now move on to what I think perhaps was the weaker part of the lesson, and that was the start. I think we could have really set that lesson in the context of an inquiry. And there are 4 stages of an inquiry lesson. First, creating the need to know, using data, making sense, and reflecting on the learning.
You have an OS map of the area of the Olympic Park. You also have an aerial photo.
The absolute strength of your lesson was in this using data. But I felt that at the beginning, this creating the need to know was just missing. There's London. Why was that chosen in the UK? And not only that, it's actually just down the road. So why, out of this whole world, is the Olympics going to be down the road? That is a really interesting question. Then it went on to making sense. Just from listening to what was going on, I didn't really get a sense of what it was like. I knew there was a station, a bit of a railway.
What I wanted them to do is to come up with certainly an image in their mind of what that place was like a year
But you see,
ago.
I think that was more like a place to start in the introductory lesson. Maybe if they'd had like those little plastic whiteboards, all write down 10 words that describe that area.
You know, if I asked them to write down 10 things about what this area is like, it's a little bit superficial. I'm getting them to describe the images rather than make sense of them. I just felt I didn't want to leave them too much. I really wanted them to take charge and decide what they want to do with these photos, how they would use them, reflect on that, and then in the future maybe they will be expected to produce something which is their interpretation of this site.
Now you're reflecting on the learning. That was going on all the time. However, your first objective was why is the site being used for the Olympic Games? So we never actually said, oh, well, maybe it's because there isn't much going on there. Because your children are so, I've got so much respect, they're so cooperative, they did all the tasks and they could see the short-term aim of each of those tasks. But maybe it didn't sort of quite fit into a whole lesson.
Yeah, Ruth had some valuable comments, I think. There should have been a question that the students are very focused on answering, so they recognise there's a purpose to the lesson. There's no question about that.
What I personally like to focus on more is what I call body talk. Yeah, so we as communication experts look at 3 sections. 1 are words, 1 is the voice, and the last one is the body. And the body speaks most of all.
So what I like us now is to link delivering your message with your gestures as well with your vocal delivery to your classroom setting.
Locate the 6 photos which you think are represented by those
6 locations on the map.
Show how many photos, and that you would like them more linked, so a bit more detailed gestures.
So if you look at the map, you see there are 6 locations. And
Can you do 6, 6, 6?
If you look at the map, you've got 6 locations. If I change my body language, how do you feel that's going to help the learners?
If I, for example, use my body language like this or this, you will suddenly interpret much more my body language rather than what I'm saying. So I will say, so what I like it now to do, you understand? You will say no, you don't come across as confident. Remember the inspector also said, how about bringing yourself more into the session? So what I like you to imagine is, here's your class, and you're sharing with your class what were the circumstances of this photo day.
It was a summer's day, end of June. Summer's day, end of June, and it was very important I went to the Olympic site to document what the land use was like prior to them removing the buildings and clearing the site. Until eventually I was thrown off because I was caught with a camera, and they weren't very happy about that. They didn't want it documenting.
Ooh, interesting.
Today has been very much like my lesson, overloaded. I've got a lot of stuff going on in my mind at the moment. The most uncomfortable part of the day was probably engaging with the body language work. I'm not a natural presenter, that's not who I am. I think I'm going to find it very, very challenging to implement some of those strategies, but quite excited.
With his final observation just weeks away, Andy's back in the classroom to put all the advice into action and raise his game.
Right, that's the purpose of this lesson. Taking objective 1, what do I want you to be able to do?
Is it to maybe look at a site and be able to produce a map with all the same features that the site has?
Absolutely.
And be able to draw them
Absolutely.
in there?
I fine-tuned my objectives. I've thought very clearly about what are the big things I want to get from this lesson rather than everything. So I think that's been useful.
Because this is a big, such a big area here, the stadium should go there, and then maybe you can have the media centre there.
The relaxed atmosphere for this particular lesson was without doubt an advantage. The learning was enhanced. And I think one of my fears is that by relaxing I maybe could lose the pace. But for me today the pace was there. What are your thoughts on putting the basketball arena here? Where's the Olympic park boundary? Right, now you could choose to put things outside of that, but you have to have a very good reason. Would you want all of these venues?
No, because it's near cars and everything. Yeah, even though they put bridges, it's still not very safe.
I'm really trying not to go for the closed body language, although I do find myself still doing it, especially this. But I do pull away.
Maybe I could just preempt, is that, do you think, quite quick or very slow?
I think, you know, I'll kick it, I'll kick it.
This feeds into the start of the next lesson. We need to pack away.
Andy's pupils give their feedback on his progress so far.
One of the most difficult things for me to do is change my body language. And so a lot of the time I do that and I fold my arms. What sort of message do you think that gives to students?
You don't look very approachable when you do that sometimes.
If your body language is positive, then we're going to be positive. Because students can interact with that.
So you're saying this is quite, not just closed body language, but also quite negative. Yeah, and that's more positive. It's interesting. You go through your lessons today, watch your teachers, watch their body language.
I'm trying to pass my hat.
There you go, see? Maybe there's more to this body language than meets the eye. It's the most important thing, what the students think about the learning that's taking place in that room. It just emphasised to me the importance of pupil voice, and they're the consumer, aren't they? They're the client, really. So in the future, I'll certainly prioritise their feedback.
I want to just draw your attention to the key question for this lesson, is can the London Olympics be successful and sustainable? Inquiries are incredibly complicated concepts. So that key question is quite important and should be there at the start of every lesson. I do recognise that. I was talking to the bioregional woman and I was very interested in where these 10 principles had come from and how they decided on these 10 principles. There's quite a story behind it. I am looking for opportunities to try and select stories that I think are appropriate, maybe give it that little bit more of me and my life and my personal involvement with the issues.
Here we're showing you a presentation about sustaining natural habitats and wildlife and how we can ensure they are protected.
I'm handing lots and lots of the learning to the students here. Sometimes it's more challenging than it's been for me in the past.
In the Olympic Games, culture is based around everything.
I've not gone out of my comfort zone. I've always been able to pull it back at a snap and like, right, okay, let's refocus. And it's really turning, actually. I think that's a positive thing. I think I'm recognising there's a lot further I can go. And the only outcome of that is going to be more successful learners.
It's the day of Andy's final observation. Claire Gillies is back, and it's make or break time.
I'm back at Sydney Russell School to see Andy Roberts with his Year 9 geography class again. I'm really looking forward to seeing how his teaching's moved on.
Now, I'm sure, from all the work we've done over the past few weeks, that you're familiar with this particular area of East London. In fact, this site here is where the main stadium is going to be located. If we go back to there, that's where I live. In fact, I know this area incredibly well as I cycle down here, around the back of there, past Stratford Station and up round to my house every day on the way back from school. And one of the things that I like to do when I cycle home is try and imagine, try and envision what that place is going to look like. And that's what I want you to do today. I want you to envision futures. And so I'm going to ask you to just shut your eyes for a second. Imagine what that site's going to look like in 2020. OK, open your eyes. What could you see, Demi?
Sort of like children running around from schools that are more like deprived and haven't got that much money to have their own sports arena or hall.
Fascinating. I want you now to put yourself in role. I want you to be a person that lives on this Olympic Park site after the Olympics. I want you to write for me a pen portrait, a description of a person's life living there in 2020.
In this, would it affect him for the good or worse?
Well, whoever he is, he's going to live on this site in 2020, isn't he?
Yeah.
So it's up to you whether he makes it as a sprinter or not. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do here is even more challenging, I think. On the board, there are some questions that I want you to consider as we listen to people's pen portraits so far.
I'm the Community Police Sergeant of London. The crime of London has risen 10 times the amount that it was in 2012. Personally, I think that the 2012 Olympics was a very bad idea at the time.
Brilliant, yeah. Well, not brilliant, obviously, if that was a real case scenario, but yeah, very interesting.
I thought it was a good idea that we read out our pen portraits because it gave us a perspective of other people's opinions and the other possibilities that could happen with the post-Olympics.
I just want to close the lesson by looking up at these questions. Adil, what people like living in this possible future that's so far been portrayed?
Portrays that the community is just going to be one, like everyone's going to work together.
So do you think that is a place that people would like to live?
Yeah.
Okay. Gemma, what are some of the good things about it?
It could give many people great opportunities and they have a chance to like see how it's changed in different jobs and stuff.
All right, people, thank you very much. We will leave it there.
With all that expert advice and weeks of practice, will Andy make it? From good to outstanding?
Andy, thank you very much indeed. It was really lovely to come back and sort of see a lesson that linked to the one I saw before. Let me highlight some of the many outstanding features of your teaching. You could see evidence that the sort of content was calmer in many ways and you weren't trying to do too much. The other comment I remember making after the first observation was about sharing your personality. And there were some wonderful examples of that, with you referring to how you bike through the area. And you could tell they really thought, oh. So, you know, all that is so strong in your teaching. Tell me how you feel it went.
It's a very challenging skill to get students to envision futures. And I'm still playing in many respects with the strategies I'm using.
Do you think they did feel they actually could impact and have any influence on the future from how the lesson went?
No, I didn't want to force that. It was too big and too important to squeeze in, like we said at the start, so I held off with that.
The one concern I had was that some of the thinking was almost beyond their capabilities, because they didn't necessarily have quite enough facts at their fingertips. Talking to some of them, they weren't confident what would or would not be there for them to be considering between 2012 and 2020.
When I'm wanting students to consider futures, there is a blank sheet. You know, I don't want them to know whether the stadium might still be there. If they don't want it to be there, it doesn't have to be there. You know, in their future, it doesn't have to be there. Now, I know that's, well, hold on, it is going to be there. Well, is it in 2020? And what I do need to do, I can see from that, is develop a sort of confident uncertainty. So when they have that uncertainty, they have enough confidence to go with what that's what I want them to do. And that's challenging, isn't it? It is challenging.
Yes.
Maybe too challenging at this stage.
If I stand back from that lesson as a whole, I think it was so bordering on the outstanding, but not quite there in the whole pulling together the learning that they got out of that lesson. But without doubt, there are long lists, I could say, of your outstanding teaching features, and I'm absolutely certain that you probably have and will in the future be delivering some outstanding lessons. So thank you very much for letting me watch you teach again.
Thank you.
I knew that the lesson wasn't quite outstanding, and what the process did was make me look very closely at what outstanding learning and teaching is, because I had my own idea of what I thought it was. You know, I'm quite confident that I know exactly what an outstanding lesson has to do now, and in some respects, it is ticking a lot of boxes, really. If you look at the learning that's taken place over the last few weeks with this group, I would say it's outstanding. It is, without doubt. And that's not something you can probably achieve in a one lesson. It has to be a series of lessons.